right, friends, it is 10:30, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Elise Fry. I am the Test Administration and Formative Assessment Specialist with the Utah State Board of Education. And today we are going to be focusing specifically on the RISE test administration and how that can be done remotely for our students who receive their instruction remotely. So going through today, we'll look at some slides. I'm going to go through the process with you, and then you'll also get to observe a live demo from our RISE vendors, CAI, that we have some representatives here with us that will be able to do that. So today, we're going to focus specifically, again, on the guidance for administration of RISE in that remote setting. This training is considered to be supplemental to the training that was held in September, in that it should be used in addition to what's already previously been provided, because this only applies to the remote administration piece. So when you're finished, you should feel more comfortable with the remote test administration process, as well as feel more confidence in being able to train the users in your LEA and provide support for them as it's needed. This training is being recorded. It's going to be posted on our assessment YouTube channel within the next few days. So anticipate that the link being ready for you for sure next week in our AD memo, but I will also have Emily, our support specialist, send the link with the slide deck in the next few days when everything's ready to go. Okay. So something to be aware of when administering assessments to remote or online students, these really require additional considerations above what would be encountered in a classroom setting. And this functionality, again, is only available for students who receive all of their instruction in a remote setting. And as a reminder here, though, all science tests will still need to be completed in person. Because of the nature of remote setting, completing a training test remotely with the teacher as the proctor is also going to be required prior to the administration of the summative assessment. There's scripting provided in the TAM that is also going to be required. So while completing a test in the remote setting, remote students are going to be able to communicate with proctors directly by clicking on the icon at the bottom of their screen. You'll be able to see this firsthand today. It's really cool. Students also will not be able to see or communicate with other students during the administration of the remote test. They only can communicate with the proctor or teacher of the test, okay? Because of this, it's also imperative that you have a second secure way of communicating with students, like your current LMS system, because you'll need to communicate the testing session ID prior to the session itself. The remote administration method for RISE testing allows teachers and students to communicate both through text and video chat within TDS, our test delivery system. And additionally, it allows capability for teachers to monitor students directly. So students will connect to the remote testing session using the secure browser. And while teachers and students, they don't need to buy or install any additional software to enable the remote administration feature, they do need to have a device with a working camera, microphone, and be able to ensure that the secure browser has been installed on all student devices prior to that administration. Teachers are going to sign into the RISE test administration site just as they would if they were working with students in person in a classroom. This is your remote proctoring checklist. It's provided in the RISE TAM. You'll want to complete it prior to any remote proctoring just to ensure that both teachers and students' devices are working as expected. And these charts describe the hardware and software requirements for the teacher's machine. The technology requirements to administer a RISE test remotely are similar to those used for the assessments completed in the classroom, except, again, as mentioned before, both teachers and students need to have a webcam, microphone, and speakers, okay? Before testing, you'll want to ensure that all devices meet the minimum requirements necessary before you begin. And you can use the link provided here to run a diagnostic check. And again, these slides will be shared with you in the coming days so that you have access to those. To make remote administration run more smoothly, teachers can schedule sessions in advance in addition to starting a live session. Now, the beauty of being able to schedule the session in advance is it's going to provide you with the live code that needs to be shared with students. That way you'll have it before the session starts to securely share with students who are going to be attending that particular session, okay? And as Kim has dropped in the chat here, just note 2 proctors are going to be required for remote administration of the RISE tests, just to ensure really that students also have the most optimal assessment experience possible. All of the tests are color-coded in super user-friendly drop-downs for selection. You're familiar with this if you've administered benchmarks or interims just for the current school year, or if you're familiar with it in the past. I know that summative doesn't appear here, but that's because they're not available yet. If I remember correctly, their drop-down menus are a bluish color, but Eric might have to correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But when you view the list of assessments, if you're expecting to see one that doesn't appear, I would recommend checking your testing windows, as that could be influencing what tests are appearing here or not appearing in those drop-downs. And yes, perfect. Eric confirmed in the chat that the summative ones are a bluish color. So to start a session immediately, this would be just like a regular one that you're doing in class. You would start the active sessions page, you select the appropriate test and subject and grade, but you would select the remote session type and start the session. The dashboard looks very familiar if you've administered a RISE test before, with the session ID appearing along with the option to add tests, the approvals tab where you approve students for entry, the stop session button, with the addition of the option to broadcast a message to all students in that session with that megaphone tab. There's also the refresh page button. However, if teachers choose to schedule their session, which is really what I would recommend for remote testing so that you can communicate that session ID beforehand, step 1 is going to look a little bit different, as teachers are going to be prompted to set a start and end date for when the test is going to be available prior to selecting their test and the session type. All other steps are actually going to remain the same. So if the session's a remote session, a pop-up window is going to appear in the web browser requesting access to your microphone and your camera. Users must select allow. If you don't select allow, students taking the test are going to be unable to see or hear you during those video conferences. After you've put in the date range, you'll need to select the test subject and the grade, the session name and type, and then save. Pay attention to that little blue radial that's in the session type, because you'll need to move it from that in-person to the remote option. So the session information pop-up window will then appear, and this pop-up window provides that session ID that needs to be communicated to your students. Hal, you have a question?
Yeah, Elise, so having the students take an interim test remote, would that serve as the practice test, or is that different?
That would be different. You'll want to use the training tests that are grade banded prior to any interim, benchmark, or summative remote administration.
And I don't know if you addressed it, but how long are those training tests typically for the remote?
Training tests generally, especially if students are already familiar with them, can be like less than 15 minutes. The nice thing with a training test too, you can get in, take a few questions. You don't have to finish it. It's great if you finish it, because then students are exposed to more types of questions, so they get more practice with the tools. Okay. And then
thanks for that information.
As Eric's dropped in the chat, he's actually going to be using a training test during the demo, so you'll see that. Guidance for securely communicating with students is included in a section titled How to Communicate Session Information Securely to Students. Teachers may also want to copy this session ID and just kind of have it for themselves to save in a secure location, just in case it's needed later. After you provide the session ID and link it for students, you can click the little X to close, okay? And then the test administration site is going to appear again, and it will display your upcoming sessions page. So you can see scheduled sessions along with active, if you had any active ones there. Again, with this session ID, this information should not be shared with students over unsecured communication methods like a personal email, a text blast. Instead, teachers need to communicate this information to students using a secure method, like the classroom management system that teachers and students are already using with instruction. Encrypted emails would also be appropriate as long as students are familiar with how to access information once it's been encrypted. Okay, this is one of those reasons that you'll want to conduct a training test using the remote format prior to your summative administration, because you want your teachers and students to be familiar with that communication process before being in the TDS system, as they can't use that to communicate until the test is started. If a teacher needs to, they can modify sessions that were scheduled in advance but haven't started yet. For example, a teacher might want to modify a session after it was created to change the start or end date of that session. To do this, they need to access the RISE Test Administration site, and the options for editing or deleting the icons become available next to those scheduled sessions. For students signing in on their devices in a remote setting with the secure browser, they use the same login interface appearance displayed in the RISE Secure browser that any in-person student would. So they'll log in with their first name, their SSID, and the session ID, which should have been provided securely previously for them, okay? They'll verify their personal information, and then they need to select their required test. And at this point, they will still be waiting for approval, just like a classroom student would, from the teacher before beginning. Scripted directions for test administration are included in the TAM even for this process. Once students are approved, they will complete the same series of audio-visual checks that any in-person student, there we go, in-person student would. And then once the remote session has started and students have joined, teachers can communicate with all students in that session using that broadcast feature. It's that little megaphone icon. In the type a new message field, the teacher can type the message and then click the send option, the little airplane, which will then automatically appear on the testing device of each student in the session. Students don't need to do anything for this message to appear. And because we all know that our kiddos love to use text and chat features, it might be helpful to remind students they don't need to individually reply to that broadcast message unless you request them to do so. That's like a local decision for you to make. It's nice for them to respond because then you know which students are able to access that feature. But at the same time, if you would prefer to not have them use that chat, make sure that you specify that for them beforehand, that they don't need to respond when you're doing a mass message. Students can respond to messages from their teacher individually by typing in the new message field and clicking send. When a student sends a message waiting icon is going to appear under their little image on the test administration site. So for a teacher to see the student's message, they would then need to select the student's image that's there by their name. That's going to prompt that little chat box to pop up and open. When you're doing the reviewing of the message, you can then just click the X to close the chat pop-up window, and then the test administration site is going to appear back when you're done reviewing that message or responding to the student. While students are testing in that remote setting, teachers can observe video of all students at once in low resolution in the list there, or if you want to select one student at a time, you can also view video at high resolution. So the low resolution video of all students appears automatically once a student requests to be added to the testing session. Teachers are going to see the little video icon appear for students in the pop-up window where the teachers view student test settings and where they can approve students to join the test sessions. For students, when they request to join the test session, they will see video icons for themselves and the teacher in the bottom right corner of the waiting for approval screen. And you can see that in this little screenshot here. There's two little video icons that appear. The teacher, again, can view high resolution video of one student at a time if they select the student video icon that's next to their name. And then the video conference window will also appear, not only to display the high resolution video, but it will also show the video and message chat features there. As with other applications, if you're just going to view the video and then you want to be done, you can select the X to close that video conference pop-up window if no further action is needed. But if you need to start that one-on-one video conference with a student during that time, when you click the video next to their name, you can then click the video, that little video link that's blue, and you will then be able to see and hear the student. And if you as the teacher allow, the student could then also see and hear you, okay? You do this just by selecting the student video icon for the student you want to talk to, and then you can click the little call icon as well to be able to speak to the student, not just video, if you chose to. Once that call is initiated on the teacher's device, the video conference pop-up window is going to display a split screen view of both the teacher and the student. Okay, so on the student's device, the video conference pop-up window is going to display automatically, displaying that same split screen view of both you and your student. And then you as the teacher can toggle your webcam and or your microphone on and off using those little buttons displayed at the top. You can also disconnect the call using the little button at the bottom with the little phone receiver with the X, just like you'd see on your phone. Students who need assistance at any time can request it from their teacher by using a virtual raising your hand method, similar to what Hal did here in our Zoom session whenever they take a remote test. So students who request assistance are going to appear at the top of a class list for efficient monitoring. So the system will automatically bump the student to the top of your list if they have that little red hand raised icon next to their name. And you can respond to the student request for assistance by either initiating the chat or video like we just went over. When you open that video, you can chat with the student using the messages option, or you can call the student like I'd shown you on that previous slide. You can also lower the student's hand once your communication is complete, which will then also automatically force that student's test back down to just your general population of students on your test administration site. If a student's question requires a teacher to be able to view the student's screen, there is screen sharing functionality. To do that, in the video conference pop-up window, the teacher will need to select the view icon, okay? A prompt is going to appear on the student's side asking them to give permission for the teacher to view their screen. Once the student selects the I agree box, the share your screen pop-up is going to appear where the student can specify if they want to share the entire screen or an application window or a browser tab, just anything like that as applicable. Okay, and once the student specifies which screen they want to share, they would select that little share button, and the screen sharing functionality will begin at that point. And a red dashed border is going to appear around the student's screen, the portion that's being shared. And the teacher can then view the student's screen, and they can have that conversation as needed. There's two ways to end screen sharing. The student can select the stop sharing button that's on their screen, or the teacher can select the end icon in the video conferencing window on their screen. So just like in an in-person session, test alerts appear on the list of students if the RISE testing system has not detected any activity from a student for a while. This may happen if a student's computer's gone to sleep or if the student is experiencing some sort of interruption. In the event of a test alert, all student responses are saved, so there's no concern that students are going to lose their testing data. But students with test alerts are also automatically moved to that top with tests with potential issues area at the top of the page. As a teacher, you can respond in a myriad of ways. You can select the student video icon for the student to see what might be going on in their testing environment, or you can send the student a chat message, or you can initiate that one-on-one video conference with a student if you experience something like this. After you go through the entire testing process, once students submit their tests, as the teacher, you're going to end your remote session. And after the session is ended, or once all individual students log out of the session, teachers and students will no longer be able to see or communicate with each other within RISE, okay? Guidance will need to be provided to students prior to ending, since no communication within RISE will occur once students submit their test. It is highly, again, recommended that teachers and students use the training test to practice the built-in technology prior to the summative administration, just so they're comfortable with the process and how they would communicate with their teacher before and after using a different system, but during testing using the RISE system to communicate. Okay. Once a session is stopped, it cannot be resumed. But if students need to resume their test, a new session is going to need to be started. So if this occurs, the updated session information would need to be communicated to students prior to that new session beginning. Even with remote sessions, materials considered secure would need to be stored between assessment sessions and then destroyed at the completion of the session. Things like scratch paper, graph paper that was written on by students, testing ticket information, those types of things would still be considered those secure materials and would still need to be disposed of securely. For students needing to take a remote summative, there's also a new online student field in the student setting in TIDE. This will go live in November, so it's not there yet. Okay, go live in November. All users are going to be able to see the field, and users with a school administrative role or above or higher, like an LEA level user, can edit that online student field. A teacher is not going to be able to edit if the student is online or not. Okay, this needs to be set per student as appropriate to our testing policies. So again, our students who receive 100% of their instruction in the remote setting would be eligible for this option. If it is set to yes, the student is going to be set up to receive remote testing tools. If it's set to no, students are going to already be set to just receive the standard in-person test. Okay. With that, I'm going to bring in our representatives from CAI to do a live demo of the process for you so you can kind of see this in action. And then following the demo, if you have any questions, we're happy to address those.
Yeah, thank you, Elise. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Embry. I am the program manager for the RISE assessment program. I am going to actually not be sharing my camera on Zoom, but you're going to be seeing a lot of me in just a moment once we get going on the demo. So I'm actually, Elise, I'm going to steal the screen from you.
Go for it.
The screen. Sure. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just start off from the start. So right now I'm on the just regular RISE portal. We're going to go over to training tests, and I'm going to be administering a remote test for you all to show how this works. So you'll want to log in, and I need to log myself up. Just get the Zoom screen over here. So I'm actually going to start up just a normal session. I'm not going to be doing a scheduled session because we're doing this live. So I will be doing an active session. I'm going to be using just a demo school that we have. And I'm going to administer to a reading test. So as we said, you'll want to click remote hybrid. I'm going to start the session. It's going to say, I just saw one thing, to allow to use my camera. I'm actually going to turn off this so we can get some feedback. But yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to close this out. And now, so the session is active. We have the training session ID on the top left here. So I'm actually going to show you here. So this is just a standard secure browser. So with your students, you'll just want to have them open up the secure browser like normal. You'll see the normal live test sign-in screen. Down here in the bottom left, we're going to go to the training test site, and we're going to actually turn off guest user and turn off guest session and log in like a normal student. So I have a student here. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And then we're going to pipe in our session ID, which is Let me look here for a moment. 897B3. 897B3. Oops, 3. I'm going to sign them in. And so it's just confirming the information. Again, this is just a demo student. So I'm going to say, yes, that is me. And we are going to log into this. So the student's going to get to the approval screen. And then on the teacher side, you can see I have an approval here. I'm going to go ahead and approve them to log in. And then I'm going to go back to the student screen for a moment. And you'll see the student will have to go through the normal standard checks. So, I'm going to check my camera. Hi, everyone. I'm showing the student side so I can see myself. I'm going to click this really quick, so hopefully it'll make a lot of noise. They'll check the recording section. Read my recording. Text to speech. Hopefully I can click this quick to make it not feedback. Yep. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and start this test up on the student side. And so this is a training test, so none of this content is secure. But you'll see on the bottom right, as Elise mentioned, you can see my little icon. I can click on it. There's me as a student looking, and then if I go back to the proctor screen, you can see on the left side, there's actually a preview. It refreshes about every 5 seconds on the low resolution screen. So all the students in this session, you'll see on the left side, just for bandwidth considerations, it only updates every so often. But you'll be able to click on me. And if I wanted to, I am going to turn my microphone off here just because the feedback is going to be a bit crazy. But yeah, and so then you can see, so hi, you have to have the conversation with your students. There is the messaging ability, so you can message your students. So teacher to student can send a message. And then if you look at the student screen, you'll see here they have the messages. We got a different mouse. There it is. So I can respond back. And then if I need to raise my hand as a student, I can. And on the teacher side, we would see, there we go. We would see that sounds off, but also I need help. Now, if I log in a second student, I will show you what the broadcasting feature does. Training session 897 B3 B3. Yes, that's me. Start session. Okay, so we're now adding a second student to the session. So if you ever are waiting for it, if you click this little refresh page button on the top right, it'll refresh the page if the approvals are taking a second to show up. We're going to approve a second student. And I'm just doing all the same checks as I did on the previous one. Just see myself. Sure, you've all heard that noise very often during your testing. Stop. Okay, and so now, hit refresh page here. Give it just a sec. You'll see me again. So if you wanted to send a broadcast message out to the entire group, I could, oops, got a couple windows open here. Broadcast a message. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And so it actually will read out. I have the volume turned off on my other device. Let me turn this one down. But that broadcast message went out to everyone. So if I click on, we go back to the students, you can see the difference here is that the broadcast messages have these bullhorn icons, whereas a normal message does not have the bullhorn icon. And so, yeah, so the students can go through the tests. And you see down here that the multiple views of you and the proctor, since the call is so active, and go through the test like normal. And the key here is once the student submits the test, they are disconnected. So there will be a chance at the end to review your responses. But once the student submits their test, they're automatically disconnected from the proctor. So you do want to make sure that if you do want to have your students chat with them before they log off, that they pause on that last page just to make sure. And I'm just going through this test really quick. This kind of gives you an idea of how long the training tests are. You can also see they have a bunch of different items. Oops. Yeah. Oh, listen to the audio. But once you get to that last page, it'll let's wait for this audio. It'll let me.
I actually really like that it's making you do that, Eric, because it shows users in the field that it won't let kids navigate forward.
Yeah, it does. And that's the thing. So when we're testing this, it's like, come on.
They have to go through and they have to do all the things before they can submit.
Yep. Yeah, every question has to have a response. And we're almost done here. It's the last one, I think. And so once the student gets to this page, you see we're still connected. I can still see in the bottom right. Once I hit submit test, it's going to disconnect. And so it gives lots of warnings, but once you're disconnected, you are lost from the student and you need to contact them through your other means, be it your LMS or whatever system you use. But if we go back and look at the main screen here, so you can kind of see, like, it's like the typical, I'm sure if you've tested before, it shows you the progress of how far the student has gotten. And yeah, that should high-level overview. Any questions from anyone before? I will show you also where I can show you what the sound of color looks like if you'd like to see that. And I also can show the where the new button will be on the Tide interface for the remote. If that sounds good to Elise.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure. So first thing, I'll show you all. My apologies. I have two keyboards going here. So just so you all know, this is what it looks like. This is our backend system where we test everything before we release it to the field. So this is the kind of the summative color. So for the summative tests, when this goes live in November for the field, you'll be able to go in, and we actually have, this will be, the remote summatives are actually in their own folder. So you'll be sure you're administering a remote summative to the student. So for ELA, math, and science, the normal version up here. And then if you do need to administer a remote summative, you will click this lower one. The key for this is that as test session, the T interface can only support having a remote session or an in-person session running. You can't commingle. So if you do need to administer an in-person test and a remote test at the same time, they do need to be held in separate sessions. That's just the current limitation of technical nature. So just as a heads up, everyone. And then for the Tide interface, I'll show you that as well. Let's go to Tide. So I'm going to log in. So if once you're logged into Tide, and this will be going live, like as Elise mentioned in November, if you go into a student's, I'm just going to pick a demo student we have here. So if you go into a student, you will see here's all their typical settings I'm sure you've seen before, but on the top right here will be the new online toggle. And so I'm logged in currently as a state account, so I can toggle it. If you're logged in as a teacher or a proctor, you'll be able to, or I guess a teacher account, you'll be able to see this, but it'll be grayed out, like how Foreign Exchange is grayed out. Yeah, it should be, just make sure you enable that if your student is qualified to take a remote summative, and they will get the tools.
Eric, there's a question in the chat from Christine that says, can we assign remote access to only one school? We have several schools in our LEA, but only one would need this.
We would have to, so it's done by user account type. So currently we have it set to SA and above can set this. So we would have to set it at an account level. So we could set it to LE, but I guess that would be a question for if you want to set to LEA and above. But we can't limit it to just one school. It would be every SA user does have access to make this change currently.
One reason for that is this is just for remote summative, but the other reason is because the benchmarks modules and interim assessments are available for remote proctoring for every single teacher, and any student can do that. It's only for remote summative that they can't.
Yes. Yes, this toggle does nothing for the benchmarks and interims are fully available to everyone. With this toggle does not affect those. It's just summative. Actually, I'll get the chat up here. Okay. Any other questions? Or I can help with?
One quick question. So they can do remote benchmarks and interims. Is there a way for us to find out if someone's I guess if we can't lock it down for summatives, is there a way that we can pull a report to find out who's doing that? If someone's done that we maybe did not quite understand they're not supposed to with that summative test, is there an easy way to kind of monitor that if we needed to?
So in this case, there would be, since we did have, since the summative tests have that remote, on the TA interface, they had the remote label, so you'll know for sure you're administering a remote test. If you log into Tide and you run a report, you actually will be able to see the remote ones. In reporting, they will all be aggregated under one, so no matter the method the student uses, they'll still be showing up in reporting under the same test. But in Tide, if you run, I'll show you. If you run my apologies, I got a bunch of windows here. If we run like a managed testing, let's do T model. So if you go do a summative here, you'll see on the right, there's actually going to be, oh, maybe not. You're not pushed this yet into QAT. So this is our backend, so we're still not making an update, but it will show up on here. There will be the remote test, so you could look and see if someone took a remote one pretty easily.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I responded in the chat to Ben's question about, can we clarify the role of the second proctor and do they really need to be in the same location? And the reason is, you guys, for remote summative testing, there are huge security issues. And so one of the things, the reason why they need to be in the same room is multiple things. First of all, they have to be able to communicate with each other securely without sending secure information over the internet or via email or text. The one proctor will be always monitoring the students, while another proctor may end up having to pop off into the chat to answer a question. And that way, the students are always being monitored at the same time. This is not the same level of testing that we have with the hybrid model, or whenever they're in person where they can easily observe and answer a question in person at the same time. So with remote summative, and these are students that are fully online, that's one of the requirements. Yeah, they can have separate devices, but in the same room. Yeah, Ben. That's what we're hoping. That's what we're recommending, so that somebody is monitoring while the other person is answering the questions. And that way, because they can log into the session, they can also monitor, and there won't be more than probably 10 students in a session at a time, because more than that, you actually can't monitor the students. One of the recommendations we had when we first started doing this back in 2020 was that the students and teachers really need to be using this system more than once. Just logging on a training test the day before you're going to take a remote summative test is not enough practice for the students. So for our fully online students, and their instructors, we highly recommend that they're utilizing remote administration for benchmark tests, or that they're administering an interim test. And remember, we don't recommend using both of those in the same content area, but it's really important that the students and the teachers are really comfortable with, oh yes, I'm going to be on a camera. No, I can't have my phone next to me. Yes, I need to be in a quiet location. There will be a lot more guidance about this in the updated test administration manual, but this is one of the most important considerations is secure testing. And this is just for RISE. We haven't even got to the, Utah Aspire Plus yet, but for RISE, we know the system works well. We know it's effective. And so that's one of the things that you need to be taking into consideration. One other thing, remember that even if you are fully online, the science tests are not offered in RISE grades 4 through 8 for remote proctoring. So you're still going to have to test those science tests in person. Tiffany, you wouldn't be able to share a screen. You'll have to have 2 different devices because the system won't allow you to do that because the secure browser will kick them out. So they need to be in they have to be in the same, you cannot be in Zoom and be in the secure browser at the same time. The system doesn't work that way. So it's really important to understand that they have to be just like they were administering this in person. Both administrators will have to be logged into the session on their own devices, and that's why we're saying they need to be in person together, because if somebody needs to go to answer a question, the other proctor can say, okay, I'm watching this for you and the other ones, but there's no way to have a secure Zoom and run the system.
Any other questions that we can answer for you? Ben, the timeline for summative science remotely, we don't have a set timeline. While it's definitely on the radar, there's not a set timeline for when that would be available.
To add to what she said is the situation is with our science MOU, the other states have to agree for remote proctoring, and they are very uncomfortable with this test security thing. And Melanie, you can't, you cannot, you can go in and do Zoom. But one of the things you want to do is the Zoom link. You need to make sure that it's secure. It's better to follow the guidance that and Elise gave you with using, your LMS system or however else you communicate securely with students.
Any other questions or concerns? Again, you can drop them in the chat if you have been, or if you want to come off of mute, you're welcome to do so. With that, then, I will just remind you that this was recorded. We will get it posted to our YouTube channel in the next few days. I will include the link in next week's AD memo. But once it's ready, I will also have Emily, our support specialist, send the link as well as this slide deck out to participants so that you have access to it. Again, thank you so much for attending. You are free to go. Or again, if you have other questions that you would like to have addressed, feel free to stay on and we can answer those questions for you.
Thanks for your training and time today. Have a great afternoon.
You too, Christine. Thank you for coming.
Of course. Of course.